welcome to Salesforce training. Today we are talking about the basics of testing. Alright, let's do it. Let's get the worst of it out of the way. All deployed Apex code in Salesforce must have a test coverage of 75%. Every Apex trigger must have some sort of coverage and test methods. And every Apex test method must execute without any uncaught exceptions or exceeding any governor limits. How do you actually check your code coverage? In Setup, just search for Apex classes in the quick search bar and you'll be able to see your calculated code coverage there. In the developer console, there's actually a column where you can see your code coverage broken down by class or trigger. Clicking on that column is going to display a highlight over your code of what code has been covered by unit tests and what hasn't. It also displays the number of times a particular line is executed by a test. So what about the test methods themselves? Fortunately, they're not anything crazy different to what we're already used to if you're coming from a developer background. Test methods should be private, static, and return void. There should be no parameters in a test method. Great naming convention for tests is that they either end in tests or start in test. Just make sure you're using assertions and that you've got the @test annotation before every test method and test class. By default, you cannot see any of the data in your own org when you're testing, which is actually fantastic because we don't want to be testing any sort of dangerous functions on our own data anyway. We always want to be creating our own dummy data for this. There are two ways to create dummy data in Salesforce. The first way is to load data from a static resource. In your static resource, the first line is your columns, and then each of the rows after that is your actual records and data. Make sure you get the name of the file right. This is really fantastic for inserting records that have a parent-child relationship because you can put in a fake ID that creates that relationship in your dummy data. The second way to create data in Salesforce is by using the Apex utility test data factories. These are classes that are declared as public, methods that are static void and also public by default, and the isTest annotation is above the class. Use the @test setup annotation above any method that you want to be your test data factory, and that will make sure that method is executed first. This method will provide the data to all of the other methods in your test class. You should only have one test factory per class, otherwise there's no saying which test factory will run first. You can also use system.runAs and then specify a user that you would like to test this out as. This is only available within a test class and allows you to test methods based on a user with their sharing permissions. The last thing to remember here is that testing does count towards your governor limits unless you use test.startTest and test.stopTest. These can kind of be the two slices of bread that sandwich together any testing that will count towards your governor limits. All it's doing is resetting you a new set of governor limits for that particular spot. Once you reach test.stopTest, you're back to your old ones. Alright guys, that's it for some testing basics in Salesforce. I hope you learned something useful and we'll see you back here for the next session. Thanks guys!